Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, David.
It's my pleasure. Delighted you have me.
So, as you probably are aware, Buckhead Heritage strives to promote and protect Buckhead's historic resources here. And I thought your perspective over the close to 50 years that you taught at Westminster, a private school in Buckhead, would be very insightful and kind of the evolvement of Buckhead over the years. But before I do that, I noticed on your background that you're actually not from Atlanta or Buckhead. So how did you and your family come to be here?
Okay, this is a Buckhead semi-story.
Oh, great.
I was living in a small town in Ohio called Ripley.
Okay.
1,700 people, which probably has less now. And my father was a teacher and coach, and my mother was a teacher. And there was no employment for teachers in the summer, and my father got a job at a camp in West Virginia called Camp Greenbrier.
Yeah.
And we went a few years as part of that. Well, about the third or so year that we were there, two gentlemen from Atlanta arrived, Ivan and Inman Allen.
No kidding.
No kidding. Ivan and Inman Allen came to the camp.
Yeah.
And they went to a school called Westminster. And Dad got to know them, I got to know them, but they were a couple of years older than me.
Yeah.
And we had kids there from Baylor and Macaulay and other places too, and Mobile. And Inman and Ivan told my dad that, Mr. Drake, you ought to look at Westminster as a possibility of employment. Said, you would like the school and the school would like you. So after I had just finished during the year of my 7th grade, my father flew down and talked to Dr. Presley and visited the school and was highly impressed and didn't get an offer. So he came back and he told Mom, well, we're here, we're probably going to move to Greater Cincinnati after the 8th grade year because the schools are better down there. Well, in the middle of the summer, I was delivering papers in Ripley. Dr. Presley flew to West Virginia, hired my father for the coming year, and hired my mother sight unseen.
Huh.
So we moved to Atlanta in 1956.
Okay.
We lived in then the out-of-the-way place called Vinings, and nobody wanted to go there.
Yeah.
But I went to Westminster, and so that was my introduction into Buckhead and into the Buckhead community, and it was thanks to Inman and Ivan Allen.
That's amazing.
And that's how we got here.
So tell me about your wife and how you met her.
I met my wife at church. Now, she's going to kill me if she sees this.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to tell the truth.
All right.
She moved to Atlanta from Birmingham. She had gone to Birmingham Southern where her mother taught. And she wanted to get out of Birmingham. And she came to Atlanta, and she didn't have a car, and she was on the bus line. And she came to First Presbyterian Church one Sunday. She ran into a lady that ran the choir. My wife sings. And so I met her probably the first Sunday she was in Atlanta. Oh, how are you? Oh, good to see you. And after church, I spoke to her again. And she said, well, I got to go. I got to catch my bus. She ran off from me. So 5 years later, we started dating. And she says, and she's right, we had both changed. She was looking for one thing, and I wasn't sure what I was looking for at that point. I was 25 and just started teaching, and I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And so we got married when I was 30 and she was 27.
Okay. Was that average or was that a little bit late in the...
We were late.
Okay.
We were late. We were a later marriage. I was very fortunate. I thought she was already married, and I thought I blew that one. Mm-hmm. But she wasn't, so.
Gotcha. And you guys still go to First Pres too?
We still go to First Pres because she still sings in the choir. My daughter now sings in the choir that's here. Mm-hmm. My other daughter lives in D.C.
Okay.
But they sing in the choir, and so, yeah, we still go.
Gotcha. That's kind of an interesting subject line, I guess. How do you think the churches and religion in general as a part of the lives of the citizens of Buckhead has kind of evolved over the years? I mean, are the church stronger, weaker?
I think that, well, obviously the Protestant denominations are losing members, I think. But I think for the Buckhead community, it's still kind of strong. There are really good churches in Buckhead. One right across the street from you all is powerful. Ours is still strong. Central's strong. North Avenue is strong. The Episcopal Church is fantastic. I've visited there a lot. I think that where it's sort of dropping off is in the younger single generation who don't have kids. You know, when you start having kids, you start thinking about, I need to get them in a church program. I need to do this. I need to do that. So let's start looking around.
Yeah.
And
I'm guilty of that. I worked on the first prize and had my 20s and worked each year.
Oh, I know. Well, I mean, I was not always there in my 20s, I'll be honest. My mother used to give me grief. Why are you still asleep? I'm still asleep because I stayed out too late last night. But hey, so yeah, I think that overall the denominations are weaker, but there's still a lot more people who will classify themselves as religious. They just don't go to church. And, you know, I think the churches have adapted and reached out to people much more than they used to. You know, it used to be if you weren't there on Sunday morning, you missed everything. Now they try to reach you online, they podcast, they do all these things, and all the good city churches do that.
This may be a tough one, but how has Buckhead changed for the better, and how has it changed for the worse over time?
I think for the better, it has a lot more diversity in it, a lot more people involved in it. It attracts people in business from all over, not just American, but, you know, from outside. So I think in that sense, it's a lot easier to get involved in things in Buckhead than it used to be. Buckhead probably was a little more closed when I was coming along. I don't know that, but that would be my guess. The worst, why did I get here early? Traffic. The traffic is the traffic. I mean, it just, you know, I can remember when, you know, you could ride down Peachtree Street, and if you rode at 30 miles an hour, which I think was the speed limit, you made everybody mad because people were passing you and going straight. And now if you come down at certain times and you can go 5 miles an hour, you're doing pretty well. You know, but I think in that sense, another thing I think is good is there's a lot more encouragement of walking in Buckhead now than there used to be. You didn't walk in my growing up days, and even in my early teaching days. You drove to where you were going, and you got out and you went in. But, you know, now there's encouragement of people living in the area and moving around and going to, you know, I can walk to this grocery store, I can walk to the bookstore, I can walk along Peachtree Street down to the churches. The sidewalks have done a tremendous job. There weren't that. If you weren't taking the bus, you didn't get out on the street in Buckhead much before.
Do you feel like it's safer?
Is it safer? That's probably not safer, but I think that goes with the access of the people. I don't see that as Buckhead's fault. I see that as, you know, people can get guns and people can move around and they can commit robberies, and, you know, it's probably safe unless you're out at 2 o'clock. I mean, now when it was the nightclub scene, which, by the way, I didn't participate in because I was already married and my wife was well under control of the checkbook at that point. So we did not participate in that action at all.
Coming up the limelight. So.
Oh, well, here's an interesting story about the limelight.
Okay.
Before it was the limelight, I think it was a dinner theater. Check into that. I don't know. But I went over in the corner of that shopping center to a dinner theater. And what you would do, you would get a dinner, and then they would put on a Broadway play in the round. And we went to a couple of them over there. One of them being a performance of Stephen Sondheim's Company. And so we would do that on the evening. And then, of course, all of those folded, except I think Shakespeare Tavern still is under the same kind of thing as that.
There was an Agatha's for a while, but I think that's...
Agatha's, yeah, I think it closed. But those are the type things they would do. And occasionally I would have friends who would get bit parts in those plays, and so we would try to go see them and see the friend do his thing in the play. I saw a funny thing happen on the way to the Forum and that, and I saw, not there, but I saw Barefoot in the Park. And of course, at the end, this guy had about 8 moves right off the edge of the stage, which was right where I was sitting. I mean, it's like we could reach out and shake hands. And when we left, the cast was out front shaking hands, and we said we enjoyed it. And he said, "I know where you sat." In other words, I was watching you. But I think the Limelight was definitely... Before that, I think it was a dinner theater in that area. So check that out and see, and you're going to do the Limelight thing.
You never had long hair and disco?
I never had any hair.
Gotcha.
My hair was going by the time I left college.
What about as far as political or economic cycle crises, that sort of thing?
Well,
I mean, do you feel like it was insulated here in Buckhead, or?
No, not really. I was clerking for a sole practitioner in downtown Atlanta when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I was downtown the day before, and my boss decided the day of the funeral he would shut the office, which was a wise move. But when I was downtown doing the law clerk stuff, you could cut the tension. Everybody knew exactly what was going on, but nobody knew what was going to happen. And Buckhead was involved in that. Ivan Allen was a Buckhead boy, and he was the mayor. And he made Buckhead proud with his actions, I thought. And so he brought the business community into the civil rights movement, which I thought elevated Atlanta in a lot of cases. We had problems. I'm not... that's true, but he brought that in to the business community getting involved in things of that sort. A.B. Paget, who went to First Church, is deceased, but he helped bring business people into helping the school system of Atlanta, not Northside nor Fulton, but the city inner schools, Carver, and places like that, and tied these people together so that they could contribute some money and some time to help get kids moving. So I don't think Buckhead was isolated in that sense. I feel like it was integrated in a positive sense, from my perspective. Yeah. From my perspective, having gone to law school, I, had gotten to sit down and talk with Andy Young and Lester Maddox, the other extreme, and people like that who we had come into the law school and speak. And, in those days, you could invite people from any persuasion to come speak, and people came and listened to them. And they didn't try to shout them down, and they didn't picket to have them not speak and all the stuff that's going on today, which gripes me terrifically. Right. You need to be able to listen to everybody, whether you agree with them or not. But Buckhead was involved in that. Now, it wasn't the mega area that, it is today with the stores and stuff. I mean, there's a club that, obviously I wasn't a member of it because A, I didn't live in Buckhead, and B, I didn't go to North Fulton, but the Buckhead Boys Club, you will occasionally see that in the paper. That was mostly North Fulton, some North Side people, kids who'd grown up in Buckhead, and when they graduated, they formed a club. At one point, Charlie Brightup was a member of that. He still is, but I don't know that it still meets. And so...
They have a Facebook page.
Yeah, well, we weren't, obviously Westminster people weren't as much a member of that as were the Norfolk and Northside guys. I taught with a guy who went to Norfolk. He's a terrific athlete. And he said, yeah, when I was coming along, he was older than me, he said, when I was coming along, I hated Northside and I didn't even know about Westminster. In other words, that was how much we played in the attitudes of that time. We had to make a name for ourselves.
So, you obviously went to Westminster and you stayed on there. I'm curious, just your perspective on the Buckhead private school versus public school then. I mean, was it really that distinct, or was it?
No.
Okay.
Northside was a really good school. A really good school. I had friends that came over from Northside, friends that left Westminster and went to Northside. And we've remained friends. But it was a really good school at that time and a really good option. I didn't know many people at North Fulton. I knew more people at Grady because of church. And that was a really good school. So the public schools in those areas were really good. And so it wasn't as distinct a difference as it has become. We kind of felt like we were special, but they felt like they were special. And when we talked with friends, we realized it was pretty much even. Northside was, I had a really good friend that left Westminster after the 9th grade year. And he went to Northside, and he and I stayed in touch, and he's a doctor in Atlanta now, probably retired. I haven't seen him in a long time, but, there was no difference in education. You could decide where you wanted to go.
How do you think Westminster has been, what has it been responsible for as far as building community here in Buckhead? I mean, where do you see its place? Is it more of an international school, or is it more of a local presence?
I think it has to be both. All right, so here's how I see it. This is purely my perspective. When I was here, most of the people came from Buckhead, so it was a Buckhead school. Everything that happened at Westminster stayed at Westminster. I don't mean the negative. That's not a commercial for Vegas, but that's what it did. I mean, you were at Westminster, and it had an image to keep up and a reputation to build. And so those things happened. But gradually, as Westminster became successful, people began to realize that, look, if you're going to be in the city, you have to reach out to the city. And your presence can't just be on campus. And I actually got in an argument with a higher-up, who I will not name in this, over that. Because he kept saying, well, we need to get them on. I said, we need to get off the campus and go out and meet them and do things with the business community, but with other things that are being successful in the area. I think Westminster now sees itself in that role and does it.
You have a long tenure here, almost 50 years at Westminster. My mom was a teacher for about 20 years.
Yes, we were colleagues.
Unfortunately, like her, many teachers get fed up with the profession of education and move on to other areas. You clearly did not. So is there a passion that you have for what kept you involved so long doing what you have done?
Good question. 3 things. Number 1, the kids. Number 2, the subject matter. And number 3, the athletics. My number 1 passion was the kids. I realized that I had been stubbornly denying what I figured, if I had a calling, was my calling, teaching people. And so I loved to work with the kids. Every year, I might have been fed up the year before at the end of the year. Everybody's tired at the end of the year. But it's a new class. It's a new group. It's a new thing. Athletics, I loved to coach till I got too old. I didn't coach for 48 years. I only coached 36. So, but again, it's a chance to teach in another area. I'm not teaching history, I'm teaching basketball or football or something, but it's to work with kids and do things that sort. And so, that's the thing that really kept me going. What pushed me away eventually was too much reliance on the computer. And I know it has to go that way, but I felt like I was spending too much time doing computer stuff where I should be doing more kid stuff, kid-oriented. And I miss the kids. I miss the colleagues. I don't miss the computer work. I now check email twice a day instead of every hour.
Right.
I mean,
Like the rest of us.
the rest of you have to.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
And, I was not, well, everybody says I was a Luddite, which is the group in Britain that used to attack the machines. And I wasn't a Luddite. But I wasn't a genius of it either. And so my course was online. I did all that. But after that, let's go on and teach. Let's go on and see what you can get. Can I teach you how to write? Can I teach you how to read critically? And write critically, I mean, not just the way I used to write in high school, but write critically, read critically, think, work in groups. And that was fun. The thing about it with me, every kid was worth saving. Every kid didn't do the smartest. I didn't do the smartest things. But it was my goal to try to help every kid that I could. I didn't succeed in all of them. I failed on a lot of cases. Didn't reach people's potential. Those bother me still today. But the ones that I could get, I was going to get and save. Not just at Westminster, but make them hopefully better as they went through. The 1 year I was interim principal, and that was a whole nother game that I was sort of surprised about. I went into the senior class weekly, and I told them all, I said, listen to me. I'm going to be hard on you all in terms of being here and putting pressure, because I want everybody in this room to walk across the stage with a diploma at the end of the year. I don't want to see some of you disappear because you did stuff I can't help you with, and the school's going to dismiss you. I don't want you getting in trouble and stuff like that. I don't want you not handing work in. I want you to get a diploma. They all went across and all but one got a diploma. He got a blank sheet, and he finished his work and graduated in my office 3 days later. And he knew it. I mean, they let him walk. But that's the attitude I approached on the students. I didn't always reach them, though. I missed. Still bothers me when I missed them. And part of it's my fault. I am very lucky in the sense that Inman and Ivan Allen did tell my father to apply at Westminster, and he had the gumption to do it. I'm grateful to Dr. Presley, who hired him, because I know where my life would have been otherwise. I am grateful that teachers like David Lauderdale and Pat Rudolph and people who were the mainstay, Don Gabeline at the school when I was there, Emmett Wright, who is not in good health, but he was the head of Woodbury Forest for a while. Those people might have been willing to push me out the door, but they didn't. And I got better because of that. And it was not an immediate process. I think my father and mother had given up. But I got there. And so it was determined that when I came back, it was the smartest decision I made. Interestingly, the guy who wrote my letter to Emory Law School, who was my history teacher at Center and advisor, told me, he said, yes, I'll write your letter, but you won't be a lawyer. I thought, oh God, what, I'm not going to do anything? He says, no. He says, you'll be fine academically. But he said, you're going to be a teacher. And so 3 years later, when I was a teacher, I wrote him and said, how did you know? He said, I could tell by your temperament. I knew you deep down. So that was kind of my goal, to try to know people deep down.